welcome out to Chatter with Umatter, our mental health podcast here at Chico State University. We are here back again for our third recording of these podcasts. I am Brandon Cross, and I am here with my co-host today.
Hi, I'm Alison, Dhont.
Thank you for being here today with us.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to the Counseling Center here on campus at Chico State. Their hours are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And they also have crisis hours every day, Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. And their phone number is 530-898-6345. We have amazing counselors here on staff at the university, and they all want us to succeed just as much as we want to. So they're here for us and everything that we do. They have same-day appointments. They have call-in appointments where you have to call in at like 8 a.m. to schedule something for same day. And then, of course, crisis hours as well. So these resources are here on campus, so please utilize them as much as possible. They're here for our benefit, so please do that. And so today for our podcast, today we are just going to talk about codependency and setting boundary and kind of what those different things mean, and kind of Allie and I are going to talk about our own personal experiences with that. So we're just kind of going to roll right into it.
So I have a definition for codependency to help you guys understand it a little better. It's very common in relationships with people or with other objects. It's common in relationships with addicts or mental illnesses or abuse. It's basically a dysfunction or dysfunctional environment that results in the person to adapt and use defense mechanisms to cope and survive the environment around them. Just the basic definition of codependency. Of course, it can come in all kinds of ways and experiences and all kinds of varieties. Do you have any experience with this, Ross?
A couple of years ago, I know in a recent episode I talked about like my PTSD that I was going through and like the anxiety that came with it. And during that time, I had developed a really intense codependency with like cannabis. I just like was more worried about just kind of not wanting to be in the world of like that anxiety and PTSD, and the only way that I was able to really try and escape any type of sense of like that reality was to kind of just get really involved in cannabis. So like I'd always been like in that world a little bit, but then when all those events kind of happened, it just kind of took it on to the next level. It was like, if I was awake, I needed to. And the reason why for me that I was just doing that so often was because I felt like I needed to have that escape from reality. I didn't want to be in these thoughts that I was in. I didn't want to have these like emotions I was going through. So I kind of like did what I wanted to do to kind of shut any of that out and escape from it. It was like the only thing that I knew like at that time, because I had never like been big on like alcohol. That's just like me personally, and I was definitely like on that more side of like cannabis. I felt like it was just more my flow, and even though I know there was and still kind of is a taboo about it, but it's getting less and less throughout the years and more mainstream. But I just dove like deep into it, and it completely just like, you know, I wasn't like studying as much as I should have. I wasn't like hanging out with friends as much as I probably would have liked to. And it kind of just took over my life there for those couple of months.
Wow. So it sounds like your dependency with cannabis was kind of like your coping mechanism to push away or ignore those uncomfortable feelings that you were feeling.
Yeah, I definitely used it to kind of just push that down and push it aside, which is probably completely unhealthy. But like at the time I didn't know what else to do. I was just kind of lost, and the world had just been a craze, and like reality sucked to me. So, and I just wanted to do anything I can to escape from it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like you used it to come out of that bad place, and also because you maybe didn't understand those emotions that you were feeling. You might not have even like put your finger on it, like you said in the first episode.
Yeah, the whole PTSD and anxiety thing was just a very new thing to me, and it just terrified me. And I just I didn't want to deal with it. I just would have rather been, you know, blind to it instead of like actually acknowledging it there.
Yeah, it becomes something that this like dysfunctional, that comes with a quote, dysfunctional kind of environment. I don't like the word dysfunctional, it sounds very negative, but you know what I mean. The dysfunctional environment becomes your norm, and then when you're taken out of that, you're all of a sudden faced with this new reality of like, wait, what was normal actually, you know? And then it's just like almost overwhelming.
So all of a sudden you like have to get back into like the world, and you have to go back to doing the things that you were supposed to do, like be a student or go to work or whatever else responsibilities you may have that you avoided. You have to get back into it.
Yeah, and it makes it really difficult.
Yeah, because you were so caught up in this little world and bubble that you had created for yourself that anything outside of that is just terrifying.
Yeah, it's all unknown.
Yeah.
You don't know how to, almost like not know how to function. You weren't given the right tools like everyone else was.
Yeah, you're afraid to like be judged because of like your past behaviors and what you were doing, and you're just like worried that everyone's just like gonna see you in a completely different way.
My personal experience with codependence, I think, started kind of in my childhood, growing up in a household with a mentally ill or clinically depressed family member. It was definitely really hard, but I didn't really know that it was going on when I was growing up. Like, I wasn't aware of his mental illness until I was like 14. So up until that age, I was just kind of thinking that it was normal, that, you know, these feelings that he had, or like his non-availability, or like really intense reactions to things, you know, typical symptoms of depression, worrying and anxiety, you know, stuff that would really bug like a budding teenager or a small child.
Stuff that 14-year-olds just wouldn't care to think about.
Yeah, just like unusual behavior that other people didn't show, but like my family member did. Someone who's very close to me, who's teaching me, who's socializing me, you know, who's like loving me. So like it leaves you really confused, you know, especially when you're not given all the answers to it or the reasons for it. So, and on top of that, when you're in a family kind of like that, like you're not really allowed to share it with other people, you know, or it wouldn't be okay to share with other people. It's
yeah, because you have the mentality, it's like, it's family, you know, issues, you know, so like people outside of this, you know, either don't care or they don't deserve to know about it.
Yeah, exactly. So like keep it close and just act like it's not happening, you know? So then like you're just like completely alienated from everyone, and you're kind of just left to feel like this is normal. Like I said before, like it's just, that's fine.
It has become your new reality.
Yeah, exactly. And because of this, like problems can resurface like a long time later, even after, you know, because you grow up thinking that this is kind of how everyone does it, but then when you grow up, like I remember growing up and meeting friends and being in families where they actually talked about their like drama in school or like things that they were emotionally upset about, and the parents would listen and like not come up with like a really intense answer, like
just kind of like validate their feelings.
And like that was so weird for me. I was like,
it's such a foreign concept.
It was like, what, you guys actually like do? So like growing up in that environment, like I felt a lot of blame and responsibility for the emotions of my family members, because I was really like hyperly aware of it. And I want to like really add in that my parents aren't like bad people or like abusive or anything. Like I said, like this was literally, my childhood was great. I didn't realize it was like this until later on when all these problems started to arise and happen. But
it's just we experience all these things at young ages, and we just don't have the cognitive ability to just like truly understand exactly what is going on. And then years later, when we're at school studying in college, like all these topics, you and I are both psych majors, and then all of a sudden these things like come up, and it just like, it's like things just click for us. Like a lot of our childhoods make sense a lot more.
Yeah, it started to really like my work or my school started to get really close to home, you know? And then it was like, whoa, wait, maybe there's other things happening, you know?
You realize so much that like it wasn't you. Throughout
it definitely. So like getting older and coming to college, like I started realizing I had a difficulty in like making decisions and asserting my needs and like saying no to people and defining boundaries for myself. And like I found myself in like a repeated cycle of almost like toxic relationships where someone would realize that I have this like personality trait about myself, where if you ask me like 20 times, I'm going to eventually say yes, just based on guilt and that strong emotion in me that changes my mind. So much so that I like even deny my own needs or like ignore my own values just to like connect or make that person happy, which is like not
it's
not
like,
healthy.
It's like when you know you have an exam coming up in a couple days, and your friend's like, "Oh, let's go out to the bar tonight."
Yeah, come on, it's my birthday.
Yeah,
or whatever, and
but
you're like,
you have like this major midterm in 2 days.
Yeah, you have to be honest with yourself.
Probably should have your focused attention more.
But I would go out with that friend. Like that was how. My guilt was so strong that like it was overpowering the other need to like help myself.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like the summer when I had all built up and exploded. I went through a job change. I was kind of in this like weird middle period where I didn't really know where I was gonna go. I had to get another job. What I had been doing and what I knew how to do and was successful at was ending. And I had this like, oh my god, there's no external thing to base my value on, my self-value on, which was my dependency talking to me, you know? Like, I should find value in myself, in my, like, relationships, in my own self-love, but I was finding value in that I was working, or I had this job, or whatever. So I freaked out, and I had a huge anxiety attack, and for those who have had an anxiety attack before, you know it's really hard to explain.
Yeah.
But
it's scary, especially that first one.
Yeah.
You have no idea exactly what is happening, and like your body is just trying to tell you that something's wrong, and you don't know what it is.
Exactly. And it almost felt like I don't even know who I was at that moment, you know?
Yeah.
It's like your body is just completely...
Otherworldly. Yeah.
It just completely takes over and gives you this like crazy response, and you don't know what emotion to attach to it. So you're just a big ball of like, I like to call it black yarn. I would say that.
What does it mean to be like the big ball black yarn exactly?
Kind of like the string doesn't really have a beginning or end, and it's kind of all knotted together, and you don't know what is what. You don't know why
it's
you're
all
feeling
just
like
like
this.
Jumbled together.
Yeah, I remember thinking, because at one point I was just so filled with fear and emotion that I like got up from where I was hanging out and like ran outside and down the street crying, just because I didn't know what else to do with all that feeling inside me. Like I had to run screaming down the street, which is not
you just
me.
had to do something.
Yeah, I like freaked people out too. My friends were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And like, I don't know what is happening. You know. I feel like
So what were like the steps you took like after that event happened?
Well, it took even though I am an intern at Umatter and I support the counseling center, it took me a while to take people like go to the counselor. Like, you need
the
this.
first one is always the hardest.
Yeah, like I don't need it, but I needed it.
Oh yeah.
My counselor introduced me to the term codependency and suggested I look into it, and it really helped me recognize like my behaviors and what thoughts were my thoughts and what thoughts were like that childhood brain that was taught all those weird self-valuing things. And like I'm still learning, but my counselor helped me unlearn codependence and try to find other ways to give myself the confidence and self-validation without looking for it in others.
To more just like loving yourself.
Yeah.
So when we talk about creating like these barriers, especially when it comes to codependency, because like mine was with drugs, yours was more with the interaction with the people around you. So when it comes to like setting boundaries, like how do people like us or anyone else approach those types of things?
I think that in order to set a boundary, you need to know what kind of boundary or what you need to place it on. So you need to be like really self-aware and think about your needs, and you kind of have to be selfish for it, which is really hard for some people, because you need to think about what you need from that person and like stick to it. And you need to not even be like assertive with that person, but assertive with yourself. Like if someone breaks this rule, I'm going to set the boundary off and there will be a consequence, you know. Do you have any boundaries with people, or do you have any experience with like setting boundaries? Is it difficult for you?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult with like anyone too. For me, it's like growing up in the household that I did with just like a lot of yelling and constant like arguing within the environment. It was hard to like establish any type of boundaries just because it was more of just like an avoidance of it, at least for me. Because for me, like, my boundaries that, like, I guess I created was forcing myself to just be completely active in like extracurricular activities and kind of just doing whatever I needed to do to just not be at the house. You know, I was at school for like 12 hours a day and then working 20 hours like every weekend, so it probably was the wrong way to approach it, but I didn't know what else to do at that time except just to remain busy, to keep like my mind off of it and avoid any type of environment or thoughts that related to it.
So that was your like boundary, was like kind of like the perimeter of your house was like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go like close to you because in the past I've been hurt and
Yeah.
I don't want to get hurt again, so I'm going to set a boundary of cutting you off.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Because that's basically the final boundary, you know, is cutting off the person and separating yourself
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, and I think like what really like helped kind of excel like that was, you know, deciding to leave and go to like college outside of where I was from. I think like that was probably one of the most selfish but best decisions I could have like ever made in my entire life, was to just leave home and kind of go off and try and figure out the world a little bit for myself.
Wow, so you like left everything and decided to start new because what you had was not.
It just wasn't working. It just like was a place that I didn't want to be a part of or around anymore. So I needed to get out, and so I forced myself to. And there's no better excuse than going off to college when you're that age to, you know, have the reason to just leave.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, you don't even needed a reason to leave other than that you were uncomfortable or unhappy in your situation.
Yeah.
Like
It was just like I needed to find like the good excuse to be able to just go with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Attach it to something.
Yeah. So that way, like, I feel less guilty about it. So then, like, the people around me felt like a little better about it, because it's like, oh, you know, he's just going off to college, and
Right.
that's like what everyone else does. So it was like expected.
Right. So that was your boundary of like setting a space between you and those people.
Yeah.
Because you could still be with those people and have a relationship with them, but from a distance.
Yeah.
To make it more comfortable and more safe for you.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I would say, like, distance has been a great thing for everyone in my family. It, like, has honestly helped us become closer over the last 4 years or so. And because we're not all under the same roof, that we're all out doing our own things, and it actually has helped immensely.
Wow. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, boundaries are very important. I don't think people realize that they need to set these boundaries. I think they might think that people just assume that they'll know. But, like, clearly stating your boundary and saying what you need from that person is the best way to assure that they, like, know and that it's, like, clearly on the table. And
But that can be an easy conversation, especially if it's like someone who you come to be super incredibly close with, like a best friend. Like, that can be like one of the hardest conversations you have as a friendship.
yes,
Yeah.
it can.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't understand maybe why you want to set a boundary with them, but it's still necessary to you.
Yeah. What do those conversations look like for you?
I have set a boundary of not giving them as much reaction or attention as I have in the past. Maybe not reaching out as much, but just like having my distance, having my time to be okay. I still like to reach out, and you know, I love them and they love me. Of course.
And it's the same thing with me. Like, I absolutely love everyone in my family. It was just like the environment just wasn't the most.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not their fault that, you know, this is happening. It's not their fault that they have a mental illness or an addiction or something like that. It's just the environment that it's in, and like, you just have to make that choice for yourself. Like, I'm here for you. I love you, but I need to focus on my own things. I just need to separate myself for that for a bit, you know?
But how did that feel, though, when like you initially set that and like you started really trying to practice like those boundaries that you established?
To be honest, when I finally realized that, like I said, like when I finally realized that it was not me causing these emotions in the family or these like sad, weird, awkward tension things, it was the mental illness. It was almost like a release. Like I could understand that it wasn't my fault. I wasn't to blame, and I could like finally kind of self-accept myself and set those boundaries and like give myself permission to make choices that help me and not anyone else.
To make those selfish decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you're codependent,
you want to do everything you can to help that person and just not care about yourself in any way.
Yeah.
You would rather throw yourself like in front of that bus than to have them be in front of that bus.
Right, and that's because it's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
It's like you associate giving good things to that person or making that person happy or making that person feel good or safe with being respected, loved, and wanted, you know? Because that was what was the result of that.
So you think, like, for the rest of your life, the only way you're going to have these feelings is if you continue to be that person for that individual.
Right. And it turns into, like, an anxiety of, if I say no to this person, if I don't spend all this money with them and go out tonight and not do this,
they're going to hate me.
They're going to hate me.
Yeah.
They're not going to invite me out anymore. They're not going to want to hang out with me.
Call you a buzzkill.
Yeah, and then I feel guilty and shame. And, like, those two emotions, since my childhood, have been such, like, knives, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, just for me, they're, like, my buttons. And it's, like, really scary. People can manipulate you with that kind of thing, you know? But I just gotta be vulnerable with myself in order to build up my confidence again.
Yeah. It takes a lot of internal reflection to kind of, like, understand who you are and, like, what you need. Like, it's not an easy thing to go through.
No, it's not. What about with friends? Like, with people, students? What kinds of, like, common boundaries students might have with their peers around them?
Well, especially, like, if there's, like, a group project or something, like, if you're in a class and, like, you're put into, like, this group of, like, 4 people, and then all of a sudden, as you go on the project, you know, you get to know them a little bit more, and then maybe you just see them as, like, you know, they're a group member, like, they're essentially possibly, like, a coworker, you know, you don't really see them outside of, like, that room, but then, like, all of a sudden, they want you to go out with them, they want you to, like, go do things when you never really saw them like that, and I feel like that is, like, a common thing that a lot of students will go through, or even, like, coworkers, too. Like, you feel like, and when they do try and ask you about these things, you feel like you're trapped because you're in this environment of a classroom, you're in this environment of work, where you feel like you can't get out of it because you have to be where you're currently at.
Right, because you didn't set your boundary in the beginning.
Yeah.
So then it's not unknown. And then they're crossing it without even knowing.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't mean anything by it, but like...
Oh, no, most times they don't mean anything by it.
Yeah, but then you just have no way how to react because it just completely throws you off guard.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that coming up to someone and someone thinks someone else's reality and perspective of the situation is that you want to go out with them or you want to be really close with them at that point, but their perspective is they're just being nice to you, you know?
Yeah.
They're just hanging out.
That we're just being, you know, coworkers or group members, that we have a common goal, so we just need to work together and do it.
And that should emphasize the fact that this whole thing, codependency, is not intentional, you know?
Yeah.
Like, these things just kind of happen after as a result of a long period of time in the environment.
Yeah, of just, like, things happening. Like, it's just what it is, and it's just, like, it's a human, you know, automatic nature that we don't think twice about, but it just happens.
Exactly.
So I think, like, it takes a lot as an individual to, like, really have that internal reflection, to really take that step back and to look at all these different types of relationships and interactions you having and kind of understanding where you need to put that, you know, barrier.
Right. Yes, because if you're like, if people are just crossing boundaries left and right, like, your whole world is just kind of chaotic.
You letting people cross these boundaries your whole
you letting
the whole
people
time.
walk all over you sometimes,
exactly.
you know? Yeah, you gotta set your time restraints, you gotta have your own personal space, privacy, and respect. Everyone should respect everyone.
Yeah, and it's not easy.
Oh, it's not.
Making those selfish, like, decisions and choices is, like, some of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. Do you have anything else, maybe?
I think that my last kind of no off would be for listeners to practice being self-aware of their emotions and the situations they find these emotions arising in, and try to like identify where they're coming from.
Yeah. And just validate them. Like, acknowledge them, understand that they're there and they exist, and that they're just as important as, you know, any other emotion that you go through. Right.
Because I wouldn't have been able to come to this conclusion about myself if I hadn't just let those emotions just take over me, you know, completely take control. I had to sit there, watch them, listen, study them, and then learn from them.
Yeah, and it's a process.
Oh,
it's not an overnight.
It took me months of like really bad anxiety to get to a point where I could like say I was feeling a lot better. Mm-hmm. And it's not pretty, it's not easy, but it's worth it in the end.
It's gonna be nothing but better for you. So before we wrap up, Allie, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ross.
It was a lot of fun. So this kind of just like wraps up our topic this week on codependency and kind of setting boundaries. But before we sign off, I want to remind everyone that we are on social media sites. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Am I missing one?
We have a blog as well.
Blogs and vlogs on our website, Umatter, Chico.
/WordPress.
So please go on, check those out. We got a lot of other interns. They do a lot of really awesome stuff. Tweet at us, follow us on Instagram. We got polls about topics that maybe you want to see us talk about throughout. So keep an eye out for those. Give us a like, give us a follow. A reminder that we do have the Counseling Center here on campus, open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They have same-day appointments. They have crisis hours, and they have scheduled appointments. So please utilize the resources. They are here for you just as much as anything else is on campus. So thank you for listening in if you stayed in this long, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.